Blog Talk Radio.
And in those days, there were giants in the land, and the sons of the angels of God looked upon the daughters of men and found them fair, and took of them wives, and their sons became of old great men of renown. So they have been mixing with us on a genetic level since the time of Enoch and Ezekiel's will.
Here on Earth we're intrigued by the sun, moon, and stars, and imagine there's got to be planets like ours. Some conceive of a face on the surface of Mars, so in need of a meaning and purpose we lost. That indeed they believe that these might be our gods, or that maybe with time we'll do right and evolve, and eventually reach what they seek, and then solve all the problems of man. But they really don't know that they fall in the works of our hands are but just filthy rags. So we travel the lands to dig up our past time elapses, and with it are much of the facts. Some imagine that God came in alien craft. They react in this way, they're so desperate for meaning and purpose, but satanic service, they know that they have evil motives. Am I making you nervous? I'm just scratching the surface. The signs from Ezekiel's wheel, when the skies unfold like scrolls and the breaking of seals. Heed the warning, the message is clear. Heed the warning, the time draws near. See the signs from Ezekiel's wheel, when the skies unfold like scrolls and the breaking of seals. Heed the warning, the message is clear. Heed the warning, the time draws near. In the blink of an eye, all believers will be raptured. Anyone left receives a mark or the caption. This leader will arise, claim his origins are alien, possessed by Satan on the side of the Nephilim. Profess those who left held us back from evolving, and now that they're gone, we'll solve all of Earth's problems. The worship of any one God will be halted, evolving to gods and ourselves be exalted. They'll play on these lines, and in time they'll devise and arrive at a plan that will help hypnotize all the ones left behind, the spiritually blind. He's stolen their souls, now he's stealing their minds. It's already started, we're seeing the signs. Just study the word, prophecies all aligned. Now chop off the heads of all those who fight at one earth, one world. Aren't you excited? The signs from Ezekiel's wheel, when the skies unfold like scrolls and the breaking of seals. Heed the warning, the message is clear. Heed the warning, the time draws near. See the signs from Ezekiel's wheel, when the skies unfold like scrolls and the breaking of seals. Heed the warning, the message is clear. Heed the warning, the time draws near. Where will you be in the year 2012? Are they casting a spell they're not ready to tell? It's time to reveal what they tried to keep veiled. Pure evil they hail and they sell it so well. He fell from the heavenly realms where he dwelled, a once beautiful angel that tried to rebel. Expelled from the light into darkness and hell, now a serpent and snake with reptilian scale. He wears a disguise with angelic wings and mimics the truth with a lie so obscene. He always repeats the same thing he told Eve, that you'll be supreme, a king or a queen, that you can evolve to an enlightened being, a god of your own that can do anything. He feeds on our souls with this fraudulent scheme in so many ways, but it's all just the same. See the signs from Ezekiel's wheel, when the skies unfold like scrolls and the breaking of seals. Heed the warning, the message is clear. Heed the warning, the time draws near. See the signs from Ezekiel's wheel, when the skies unfold like scrolls and the breaking of seals. Heed the warning, the message is clear. Heed the warning, the time draws near.
Why hide yourself with, creating UFO crafts and things like that? Why that deception if that's indeed what's going on?
The creatures figured out that there was one way that they could frighten mankind, and that is to present themselves as technologically superior beings, some physical UFOs.
Why would they want to abduct human beings?
UFO abduction might not be caused by physical occupants, but from creatures living in perhaps what we would call another dimension.
Posing as occupants.
Yes, the same type of interfering, harassing, paraphysical creature in every culture worldwide.
Reaching your head with the cold and sudden fury of a divine messenger. Let me tell you about heartache and the loss of God, wandering in hopeless night. The seeker of lost paradise may seem an insidious fool to one who has never sought the other worlds. Welcome, friends, readers, listeners, and viewers from across America and around the world. I'm Zen Garcia, your host. This is FallenAngels.tv, and we're coming to you on a Friday evening broadcast. It's 5 p.m. Eastern Time, and we're streaming out of Athens, Georgia, East Coast, United States of America. I've been blessed to be joined by Doug Elwell. I'm going to read a little information so that those that don't know about him and his work. He does and has been bringing incredible information out for several years now, and I've been privileged to have done shows previously with Doug. But real quickly, by day, Doug Elwell works in the field of information technology as a freelance website developer, and by night, Doug moonlights as a travel writer focusing on mysterious and exotic travel destinations around the world. Doug's second book, Planet X, The Sign of the Son of Man and the End of the Age, reveals his hidden passion as an advanced theoretical theologian, focusing on retranslating the Bible in the light of the modern scientific advancements. Doug's third book, The Riddle of the Sphinx, delves deep into the question of what is buried in the mysterious Hall of Records underneath the Sphinx, where he discovers that there is nothing new under the sun. Tonight, Doug will reveal ancient secrets regarding the creation, nativity, and end times, and how Planet X is intimately involved in the birth history, fate of mankind, as well as the secret hidden within the mysterious Hall of Records underneath the Sphinx. Doug, it's always an honor and a pleasure to have you join us. Can you give a shout-out to the listening audience?
Shout out to you guys. Zen, thanks for having me on, and God bless you all in the United States of America in these dark and evil times are coming.
Yeah, it does seem like these are oppressive times with the end game in sight with the global financial collapse, and who knows how all that is going to play out. And we're going over the fiscal cliff and $16 trillion of debt, and they're still spending like they're drunken sailors. So no end in sight. How do you see all that playing out? Because we know that this is part of the agenda for global government in the New World Order.
Well, it's just part of their plan. In order to have a New World Order, you have to get rid of the old world order. Like we had in the Star Wars movies, you basically have a situation where the old Republic is allowed to get so corrupt, in fact, it's encouraged to get corrupt, so that the rise of an emperor and an empire is necessary. People are, the left and the right, and basically the spectre-like organization behind the scenes, probably the Freemasons and other people like them, have been actively undermining the United States for some time for the preparation of the rise of the great New World Order, which will probably rise out of the ashes primarily of the United States itself.
Right.
So, not only, in my opinion, the end times beast, the seven heads, are the G7 nations, the economic powers led by the United States,
right,
which will have been undermined and the old republic swept away and replaced by the new galactic empire led by the Antichrist, and this will happen probably pretty soon the way things are going.
I want to also, since we're on this topic, get you to make mention of the gun law that was just defeated in Illinois, since you're from that particular state. But they were trying to push forth a law that would ban 50% of the firearms in that particular state, and it was shot down. But we know that the globalists and the transnationalists, that they have to come for our guns, and that is going to be a large part of the agenda for this year.
Yes. We've been fighting against Illinois gun laws, and which has, I think, the highest, if not one of the highest, if not the highest, gun control laws in the country. And we've been fighting tooth and nail against kind of like, I see DuPage County, where I live, as sort of a Minas Tirith, which is kind of holding the guard against the Mordor of Chicago, where they've been constantly trying to, it's mainly just Chicago, it's anywhere south of Chicago and west of DuPage, and DuPage is mainly pretty conservative. But Chicago is so huge and so densely packed with liberals that they've been able to guide the agenda for the state. And one of the primary agendas is to get rid of guns, even though Chicago is a gun-free zone. They're crime rate has skyrocketed. They have had over 500 murders last year. And history and statistics show that wherever you have gun control laws, you have crime out of control because no one can defend himself against the crime. Criminals are essentially cowards, and they think they could be shot in the commission of a crime. They will not commit it, most likely. So places that have concealed carry and things like that, which, by the way, Illinois will have to have because of the federal mandate that the Illinois gun laws are unconstitutional. As soon as that happens and people are allowed to conceal carry or have guns, I guarantee you the crime rate will go down and things will get back to a more reasonable level.
Well, Doug, can you tell us how it was that you got involved? Because I know your book, your latest book, is focused on the giants. And so we're going to get into some of these esoteric topics. And then I would also like to ask you about your previous books and works as well, just to get the listening audience familiar with all of the ones that you have done. So would you mind just beginning with your first book, A Mysterious World, Ireland, which you co-authored, and give us a little bit about each one, the focus, the premise, and what they're about.
Mysterious World Island is the first in a series of travel guides put out by Mysterious World, kind of looking at the mysterious side of various locations, some more interesting, esoteric, ancient parts of various locations around the world. We found that Ireland had the best cross-section of probably the most mysterious locations per square mile of anywhere in the world, except for maybe Egypt. Plus, it's a very clean and safe place to go, and it's very popular. So we chose to do Ireland, and that came out in 2006. And that's basically a combination, complete history of Ireland, including mythology, religion, ancient history, modern history, and so forth. Plus a comprehensive travelogue covering the entire island, all four provinces, top to bottom, left to right, and very comprehensive. It's a very good book. You can check that out at ireland.mysteriousworld.com. The second book, actually, is a co-author and publisher on that one. The second book I wrote and published, I just wrote by myself, was called Planet X, The Sign of the Son of Man and the End of the Age. Subtitled Planet X at the Creation, Nativity, and Second Coming, where I discuss my theory, based on Sitchin's theory, that there is another planet in our solar system which has a long, elongated orbit, similar to that of a long-period comet, which brings it into our solar system, the inner solar system, only once every 2,000 years. The last time it appeared was as the Star of Bethlehem, which presaged and heralded the first coming of Christ, and it will return again sometime soon as the sign of the Son of Man and the end of the age, as described by Jesus in Matthew 24:30. Matthew 24, if you like eschatology and end times, I recommend you learn Matthew 24 thoroughly, because Jesus basically gives a very pithy overview of the entire end time scenario in order. So there's very little confusion about what will actually happen in the order it will happen. And if you're a pre-tribulational rapturous person, which I am not, you'll probably be off-put by that, because there's no mention of a rapture at the beginning of the tribulation. He doesn't say there will be a resurrection or a lifting away of the believers until the sign of the Son of Man appears and the angels, come forth and the seventh horn is blown and so forth. So my position on that is I'm actually a seventh trumpet resurrection person.
Last trump, last day.
Yeah, last day. It's good, because that's what the Bible clearly states. You have in the Bible, right after the seventh trumpet is blown, you have a parenthetical period, and then you just have the resurrection of the saints, where the angels come down with the sickles and reap the harvest of the earth, and then you have the bowl judgments. It's all right there. I'm not sure why there's any confusion.
Right, exactly. And then and that's the harvest, the separation, and all that. I agree.
Exactly. So that's basically what that's about. And then my latest book, the book I published exclusively on Amazon Kindle, called The Riddle of the Sphinx, talks about this is kind of the heart of mysterious world. The Riddle of the Sphinx has always been kind of the beginning and end of the concept of mysterious world. The Sphinx has always been kind of the secondary symbol of mysterious world next to the world itself. And the riddle of what is underneath the Sphinx, I've always felt intuitively that whatever is hidden underneath the Sphinx contains all the answers about past, present, and future. This is, I don't necessarily follow Edgar Cayce, but those who do, what he did, he had a trance vision, probably, a demon who gave him knowledge about how there was something important hidden underneath the Sphinx, what he called a hall of records. And in this hall of records, whether the hall contained the records or something, it's not really clear, contains all knowledge of all technology, all history, and everything in one comprehensive package. My theory is that this is basically a supercomputer using somehow leveraging a gigantic, say, a good-sized sapphire stone, actually about 12 inches across is my theory, into which all knowledge is encoded. And in the book, I go into not only the history and mythology of the Sphinx, but also the hidden secret, I believe, is hidden underneath there, which is basically ancient technology from before the flood, which contains all knowledge.
Have you read the Emerald Tablets of Thoth?
No, but it's basically the same concept, in that all knowledge is written in on the Emerald Tablets. I've considered that as well, because the concept of an Emerald Tablet or any kind of a jewel having data written into it is kind of a consistent theme. In fact, the word book in Hebrew is both the root of the word is sefer. It's the root of the word book, it's the root of the word to write, and it's also the root of the word sapphire. So intrinsic to the idea of a written book is that it is actually written inside of a sapphire within the Hebrew mindset. And so the Emerald Tablets is a similar situation where you're using similar ancient technology in order to write data into jewels in a format that is effectively permanent.
Would this be similar to the crystal skulls?
Crystal skulls, if they used a laser to write into the skull or any clear crystal, you can write data inside of crystals. That's actually the next generation of hard drive. Is actually going to be probably crystal technology, where they have, and they're developing this now. It's called 3D optical technology. The CD in your hard drive actually is a primitive form of this kind of technology, except it's just one layer. With the next generation of hard drives, will be thousands of times larger, with many, many layers of crystal you can write to. For example, a CD is actually only one layer, a plastic disc with aluminum oxide written on it, which a laser then writes pits of various depth to do ones and zeros. A DVD is basically the same thing, except there's several more layers, which gives it more data to write to on a z-axis. Think of it basically as 5 CDs stacked on top of each other, or 6 CDs. With the next generation of optical technology, you'll have basically a complete crystal work, which could have thousands or millions of layers, depending on how thick the crystal is. So you'll have many, many more times data storage than you do normally. And as a result, you literally could store all knowledge on a single disk of sufficient size, unlike now where the hard drives we have are starting to get maxed out on how much we can pack on them. In order to get more storage space, we're going to have to move to a next generation optical technology, which I believe actually existed in ancient times, given the technology given to the Israelites and possibly the Egyptians, ancient Egyptians, people before the flood had known this technology as well. But in either case, God knew this technology and used it to write the 2 tablets of the law, which were effectively what we would call 3D optical hard drives.
Would you agree with Hesiod then that basically culture and civilization has been breaking down since the Golden Age, and where everybody considers that we are the most advanced and most technologically superior culture and civilization ever known upon this planet, that in truth we are at the lowest, and that our culture and society is really has degraded since the early technologies and the wisdom and knowledge that was here with the ancients?
Yes, I agree. The ancient world was probably, in the civilized eras, was much more sophisticated than we are. They even gave, the ancients even gave ages of man, the gold and silver, I think it was bronze and iron, of succeedingly more military and technological, but also it's an increase in technological savvy, but a decrease in culture and quality of life and living. And what I believe in the most ancient world, the world before the flood, was actually very highly technological, even more so than we are now. Plus, they had the cultural superiority. So it was truly a golden age, and it's this kind of golden age that those who founded America, some of which thought of it as a new Atlantis, are trying to recreate.
Right. In your study of the prior times and the mysteries of the world, have you come up upon a lot of information about Atlantis and Lemuria, or what they call Mu, or the continent of Pan, and how that ties into all of this as well?
I've studied Atlantis and Lemuria to some extent, mainly from the writings of such people as David Hatcher Childress and those kinds of people. But Atlantis, you can actually, the only really reliable ancient source on Atlantis is Plato's dialogues.
Right.
Timaeus and the Critias, those plays and or those dialogues, and they talk about Atlantis as kind of the ideal civilization, which was highly technologically advanced. And it was interesting that Casey also talked about what he called as the tuoi crystals, that or the Taui crystals, it's not clear how it was pronounced, that the Atlanteans had developed and used in order to generate great power sources that they could use to move airships to and fro across the face of the earth. But that the power source was then turned by the sons of Belial towards warlike ambition in order to conquer the earth, and this led to the ultimate downfall of Atlantis in their war against what some have termed Ossyria, which is the modern Mediterranean region, and also Egypt and North Africa. And this ancient war between these two powers, Atlantis sunk in a day and a night because apparently the weapons they were using were so powerful they disrupted the very earth itself, and their attempt to use them as a sort of an earthquake weapon to destroy their enemies on the continent ended up sinking Atlantis and destroying ancient Atlantis with their own technology. But the idea that they used crystal again of unknown origin, it might have been sapphire, possibly quartz, it's not clear, indicates that this technology might be a sort of a top technology that, when one achieves it, it indicates the end of an age, when men get so powerful that the gods, or in the Christian sense, God himself, have to come down and put an end to it, otherwise mankind will destroy himself and pollute the earth with this.
Would you say that the attempt by the sons of Belial during the time of Atlantis and their unification of the world under a global trade and how they were trying to conquer everything, that really that would be an attempt at a new world order, and that may be even Satan's first attempt at unifying the world in global conquest? Mm-hmm.
Seems to be the same pattern, where these fallen people are attempting to unify the world under kind of a global socialist control, whether it's national socialist or global socialist or whatever kind of socialist. It's centralized government control.
Right.
And my theory is that they're doing this because they know God is on its way back, and they need to put together a unified defense. In order to put together a unified defense, they have to unify the world economy, and everything. This, of course, include disarming everyone, which is why we're seeing such a great push towards this now. And eventually their end game is to provide a unified world with a unified army, which will provide adequate power to provide a competent defense against the second coming of Christ. It'll, of course, fail utterly to the point where there's really no point in trying, but they seem to need to keep trying for some reason, even though it's kind of pathetic because they keep failing, because they really have a chance. They're just up against a massively superior force. So these sons of Belial, even though they can't possibly win, keep trying because they have nothing else to do.
I think also that it has something to do with leading as many astray as possible, because they don't want any of the sons of God to inherit those orders which they abandoned so long ago.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I do. I don't think that any of God's children can be led astray. It even says the Bible will not lose even one of them. All of them will be saved. So it's really a process on the side of God and Christ and Christianity. It's a matter of processing his people and allowing the current environment to continue until the end of time, when everyone goes through their life that is preordained for them. And then at the end of time, the angels will be sent down to harvest the earth. Those who have already died will be resurrected, and those who are still alive will be translated directly. And then the entirety of all of God's people will be gathered together. And then the tares of the earth will be gathered up and burned, just like it's described in the book of Revelation, where the first sickle gathers the harvest of the earth, that is the believers, and the second sickle destroys the rest of them, and putting them like grapes in the winepress of God's wrath, resulting in a river of red wine, which is apparently up to the horse's bridle, is described in the book of Revelation. So basically, the army that they very foolishly put together to try to oppose the second coming will be wiped out so quickly, completely, that it'll be basically reduced to a huge pool of blood, many miles and many miles in circumference.
Speaking of signs and the end of the age, would you agree that with the coming of Israel as a nation again, and the pronouncement went forth in 1947, the actual nation was reconstituted in 1948, that this was a sign to Satan that this was going to be the last generation and that he had to get busy? Because it seems really interesting that right around that particular time is when we have the Roswell events and all of the different UFO stuff started becoming, very prevalent, and also the Lord, the Father, allowed us to have collections of new texts which verify the things that we've been speaking about and the esoteric nature of what has been, revealed through, like, the books of Enoch about the fallen angels and the giants and some of these things that have been hidden for so long, and that right around this particular time, 45, 46, 47, Dead Sea Scrolls, the Nag Hammadi codices were all found, the Roswell events start happening, all the UFO stuff starts to happen, that Satan knew that this was the fig tree generation and that he had to get busy?
Yeah, well, Jesus said, "I saw Satan fall like lightning from heaven." He might have been referring to the events of the end times when the Roswell event and similar events where some of their craft were shot down as part of the cosmic war, and they escaped to Earth, where they started giving out some of their secrets, technological secrets, to mankind, so they could build weapons that would be capable of causing problems for the invading army that was following right behind them. So there's basically sort of a space fleet kind of situation in space, which is probably cleaning up their remnant of the fallen angels and hurling down to Earth, where they are in the process of marshaling the forces of the Earth, giving out their technological secrets in order to give us the ability to build powerful weapons that they can use in our war against Jesus' second coming. So
right.
The net of it is it's all about Satan building an army to oppose the second coming, and everything else is just details and the process of that happening. And like you say, the founding of Nag Hammadi and the rise of immorality and the rise of socialism globally, it's all part of Satan's workings. I imagine most of the fallen angels, if not all of them, are actually on Earth now in a concentrated form. So that might explain why they've been so powerful recently and have been able to effectively fight against the people of God, because there are just so many of them. They're no longer in heaven. They're probably all down here and fighting desperately to maintain a foothold here, because this is their last stand. If they lose here, they lose everything, and they know that.
Right.
So they're desperately struggling to make sure that they maintain a foothold for as long as possible before they finally lose it.
Yeah, absolutely. And it also seems like right around that time that the fallen angels started going to different governments of the world. We hear about Eisenhower meeting, and that the governments, some of the governments of the world actually signed treaties with these particular beings and are allowing their citizens to be abducted, and people are being disappeared, and then the deep underground bases being built over some of these old ancient cities and technological sites that have been here since, even before the creation of modern humanity. So yeah, I agree with you. I see all these things coming together and unfolding in this day and age, and we are in the days as in the days of Noah. So, but can you tell us, Doug? Let's go into the giants and tell us how it is that you came upon the knowledge, how it was that you were brought to this discernment, and what drove you to write the book you're working on now.
Well, I've always felt I've seen sort of a creeping progressivism and liberalism in academics, theology, even theological academics. When I went to Eton College, a lot of the stuff they taught was a liberal scholarship, which I thought was useless, but I had to learn it because it was required for the classes I was in. And the basis of a lot of liberal theology is that the Bible is not really the true and accurate Word of God, which I find to be ridiculous because that was contrary to the statement of faith of the college, but it's just the way things are now. In order to get accreditation for a degree, you have to teach these things, and this is part of the creeping socialism we've seen invading and poisoning even our Bible colleges and things like that. So part of my way of fighting back is by fighting against this creeping liberalism, which, for example, in the NIV, they remove all references to the giants, all references to the dragon, any kind of mythological stuff. They cut it all out. So in order to fight against that, I have been promoting the giants as legitimate and really the central concept of the Bible. Is the giants are the primary enemy of Israel and always have been. The people of God since the beginning, even since Cain and Abel. Cain was also a modified human, what I refer to as homo artificialis, artificially modified man, who constantly fought against the people of God. And this is reflective of the sort of a proxy war between God and Satan, which is now taking place in the material level between the people of God and the people of Satan. And it says quite clearly in Genesis 3:15, the two seeds will war with each other till the end of time. The ultimate example or expression of the seed of the descendants of Seth being, of course, Jesus, and the ultimate example of the seed of Cain as he was regenerated after the flood, because all the descendants of Cain were killed by the flood, will be the Antichrist. So this war between the seeds has been taking place since the beginning, and my motivation is to say this is what it's all about. Not this feel-good theology that we're being peddled by these televangelists. This is a war. We're at spiritual war,
right.
Powerful evil. And if you feel good and if you're fitting in with the world and you got your career going, you got your fat 401k and your kids in college, you are not doing the will of God, because Jesus said, if you were doing well with the world, you are not following me, because if I was their enemy, how much more would they hate you? So one of the ways I look at it is if I'm doing well in a worldly sense, I am probably not doing the will of God, or at least not following the teachings of Christ. So I took that seriously, and I make it a habit I like to annoy liberals. It's kind of a fun hobby I like to do. And the best way to do that is to take the Bible literally, as the literal Word of God, promote conservative values based on the Word of God, and anything having to do with the Bible, they hate it, partly because of the demons inside of them that empower them and give them the strength they have to overcome the people of God to this point of hate the Bible and hate everything about it. So you see someone like Bob Eckel on the 5 or something like that. That guy has powerful demons inside of him. Those guys, the liberals, they sold themselves to the devil, and that's how they get their power, and that's how they've been able to do so well. Nancy Pelosi, the guy who's the leader of the Senate, that little maggot, whatever his name is. All those people are totally evil, totally possessed by Satan and controlled by them. And so in every way I like to fight against them by kind of seeding the people of God and the world generally through other shows, various shows that go on, the books I write, by talking about the Bible as the true and accurate Word of God. The mythological elements are actually real. The giants actually existed. And the fallen angels exist, and there is an actual spiritual battle going on. That's my motivation. I like to fight the fight by engaging in sort of an info war where you re-inject these ideas and reinvigorate the people of God by reminding them of what's actually going on, and to wake up and see this is a real struggle. And just reading your feel-good books, going to your seminars, and going to church every Sunday and giving the tithe, that's not enough. You have to actually be salt and light in the world and stand up for what is right, even if you have to do it at your own personal risk.
Amen. I know you are Abraham's seed, but you seek to kill me, is what Christ said about him. But Doug, I want to honor you in your bringing forth the truth, because I know when I published my fourth book, Lucifer, Father of Cain, I had totally no idea that I would be attacked the way that I have been. And I honor you because even before you came on my show, and you had this discernment, and you were blessed with this knowledge. And I think it's one of the most important things. In my opinion, it's the skeleton key to unlock so much of what is currently hidden and veiled within the Word, especially, Matthew chapter 13, where the Lord explains the parable of the wheat and the tares and lets people know about, the Pharisees, the enmity between the seed lines, and how it is that Cain is separated from the line of Adam and Seth. So can you speak about what it was, how it was that you came to this knowledge, and when it was that the Lord first led you to this discernment? Because this is such a contested issue, but like you said, I think it's so important, because if you don't know this, you don't even know that we're at a war with these particular sons of Cain, sons of Belial, that are dedicated to evil and to serving the fallen angels and their father Satan.
That's right. Well, the line of Cain and those who came after in the world after the flood, those who followed after Satan, these were given gifts of knowledge, and their bodies were modified in such a way that they could be taller, stronger, more charismatic, more intelligent than the average person. But they were payoffs because they were insane. And they had to allow the demons to inhabit their bodies, which made them do things with their bodies that were unseemly and highly immoral. So my motivation, actually, when I was looking for things to write about for Mysterious World back in the late 90s, I came across, actually the early 2000s, I heard Steve Quayle talking about the giants, and I thought that sounded interesting. And that was one of the things I'd always been interested in as a sort of a lay Bible scholar. And after I'd gotten my master's degree in biblical studies from Old Testament biblical studies from Wheaton College, I'd written my thesis on the conflict between Yahwism and Baalism in ancient Canaan, and that kind of touched upon the giants, so I never really got to fully flesh out my opinions on that. So I did, for Mysterious World, I did a series of articles called The Giants in the Earth, where I kind of fleshed out the conservative interpretation, literal interpretation of the Bible, which is that the giants literally existed, and they were literally the offspring of fallen angels and human women, and that the purpose of them was to fight against the people of God throughout time. In fact, we see in the book of Exodus, as you know, you maybe know, right before the Israelites came to Mount Sinai, they were attacked by a group of people known as the Amalekites, which I believe were actually giants, perhaps the greatest and most terrible of all the giants. They are described by the prophet Balaam, the evil prophet Balaam, as the greatest of all the peoples of the earth. And I determined, I looked at that, they were first among the nations of the earth, which means they were kind of the most powerful race. And by studying their name, the word Amalekite, Am means people in Hebrew, Melech means king. And this is analogous to the term Aryan, the Sanskrit term Aryan, which means lordly or kingly people. And the rabbis sometimes thought that the Amalekites either were or related to the Germans. Sometimes some rabbis believe that because it says in Exodus, after the Amalekites were defeated by the Israelites, God says, and he says there's of no other race, not even the giant races, I will have war with Amalek from generation to generation. This means until the end of time. But what I think the net of that is, this was these were ancient Nazis, an ancient giant race, the most giant and most fierce of all races, and the most terrible and most evil of Satan's children, the Rephaim, the ones who came after in the world after the flood. The Nephilim were the giants of the world before the flood, And the Rephaim were the reborn giants of the world after the flood. Rephaim is actually taken from the word Rapha, which means to heal or to be healed. And the sense of these beings returning, it literally means to be reborn, to be resurrected. So the Rephaim, the giants of the world after the flood, are literally the resurrection of the giants before the flood. And so this is an ongoing kind of revivification of the giant war between the giants and people of God. The descendants of Canaan and the descendants of Seth of the world before the flood is rejoined by the fallen angels coming down in the land of Canaan and probably other places, beginning to do interbreeding with women again and to create this giant race. And the Amalekites were the greatest and most fierce of all the giants. Israelites defeated them. And after the wanderings in the wilderness, 40 years, they've been spiritually prepared, ready to take on and exterminate the rest of the giants in a war against the giants, which I call we always war against the giants. Because if you do not defeat them again, it would become necessary to rid the world of them with a second flood, and that wasn't part of God's plan. So instead, he raised up the Israelites as this nation of holy warrior priests, which he used to wipe out the next generation of giants. And as a result, the Israelites took the land. They didn't manage to defeat all the giants, but they got almost all of them. The remainder of the giants weren't really killed off until the time of David, when he fought against Goliath and his brothers, the six-fingered Philistines. But the war against the giants is definitive of Israel. They're the primary enemy. And how you could not think that was important and dismiss, even so-called conservative scholars of recent noted mainstream theology say this is just, symbolic of something. Of course it's not symbolic. Where did Goliath come? It doesn't make any sense. So I tend to dismiss these scholars as incompetent because they are. And they're obviously not led by the Holy Spirit because they're concerned more about the world spirit and about their reputation. If a scholar is more concerned about their reputation, and then if they fear the world more than they fear God, they are not truly following God. And so, in my opinion, you can dismiss them. And this is one of my motivations: is I'm stepping up to the plate because no one else is. Seriously, I mean, someone like you're doing it now, but because of me and Steve Quayle and people like them, we're lighting the fire and holding up the torch, so others can see. We will not stand idly by while the Bible is badly mistranslated and mistaught, and a new generation of Christians are taught lies of the world instead of the truth of the Bible is not acceptable. We're willing to sacrifice everything if necessary to stand up for this true until the very end when they finally get the last of us. So that's my motivation and influence is that I want to make sure the people of God, while I'm here, I make a positive difference, not just be another parasite. And I want to be a holy warrior for God, not just another dead fish going with the flow.
Right. And I want to speak the truth. I want to be like Ezekiel 33, the watchman sounding the trumpet and bringing the warning to the people and bringing the information to them, and and then it's in their hands. They have the choice to act on and decide on, and to believe or not, and to research and confirm or not. And I would even ask the listening audience now to never believe anything that I'm bringing forth, to go and do your own research, to verify these things for yourself, to take it before your personal relating and relationship with the Father and the Son. They are the final arbiters on discernment and on truth, and so everybody should have connecting links in relationship with the Father and the Son, and not have to go through pastors, preachers, or religions or other people's opinions to find that relationship.
That's right.
And here's another thing too. You had made mention about how Israel, once they were freed from their bondage and the Exodus occurred and Moses took them into the wilderness, that when they were taken into the Promised Land, and Joshua, he was mandated to kill every man, woman, and child. And for people that do not understand that these particular beings that are being spoken about, that they were the sons of Anak and that they were the giants and that they were cannibals and they worshipped the fallen angels. They did the child sacrifice, the victim sacrifice, as spoken about with the worship of Moloch. that's why the Lord, even with the flood, He eradicated the seed once before in such way, and so that's why it was that He sent them in and commissioned them to do the things that they did. And so many people think that God is an evil person, or the God of the Old Testament is not, connected to the God of the New Testament because He had ordered these things, but people don't understand the truth. And so that's why it's important to study these things and come to confirmation on them.
The giants were criminals in every sense of the word. They were totally evil. Everyone there had been apparently modified by the fallen angels so that they were at least part giant, I'm thinking. And they were using these people to commit very evil acts on a routine basis, and there was nothing that could be done. They couldn't be retrained. And they were probably from an early age they were molested, and who knows what they were done to doing to these people, so even the children were corrupted. And I'm also thinking that there may have been a disease that was rampant throughout the area as well, which the Bible refers to as zarats, which infested that region. And there was even prescription in Leviticus 13 describing how to cure this stuff, because it seems to have been kind of prevalent in that area. It was also called the disease of Egypt, and also the Megafa. Various places have done a study on that. Megafa literally meaning a disease which strikes at the foot. And my theory is that if you recall, when the manna fell on the ground in the morning, whatever manna was left was eaten up by this mysterious small red worm, which I suspect is this kind of disease carrying, or is actually the disease, a sort of a nanotechnology that Satan, my theory is that he uses to kind of infest people by dropping it and self-replicating, and it invades the body through the foot. Thus the term Megafa, the disease that strikes at the foot. And this is, I believe, is what they're referring to in Genesis 3:15 when he say, your seed shall crush its head, but their seed will bite your heel. This descendants of the serpent will use this nanotechnology, this kind of mini little serpent worm-like creature, to kind of infest areas and take people over. And if they don't have the Spirit of God within them to fight it off, it will literally infest their bodies and take them over, and they'll become irretrievably corrupt and infested with this disease to the point where they literally have to be exterminated, otherwise this disease will spread everywhere. So it's not just a question of bad behavior. It might be they had an incurable disease, which, if it were allowed to continue to spread, would basically corrupt the entire earth and require a second flood. So there is possibly that there was a disease which will probably return, which I suspect is Morgellons or like Morgellons, which literally infests the body by entering it through the foot and making its way through the body and creating networks of fibers. My theory is that this fiber network is actually used by Satan in order to create a kind of a secondary nervous system which can use to override people's thoughts and possibly their motor coordination. When it gets advanced enough, it can literally be remote controlled. We actually could do this now, theoretically possible. So my theory is that one of the end times diseases is actually, or near the end, is that people will literally be infested by this stuff, and Satan will use it to create an army of people whom he can literally remote control, fooling them to thinking it will actually give them eternal life and these magical powers, but it actually is just yet another form of control.
Well, Doug, you said you had gone through the process and got your master's in working through theology, and did you go through like the seminary colleges and stuff like that?
No, I actually had a degree in marketing communications, and I had enough credits so I could get a second degree if I took some additional classes to get a degree in Old Testament biblical studies. And so I wanted to, always wanted to learn ancient Hebrew, so I took 2 years of ancient Hebrew and got a master's level understanding. And so I'm able to use the major Hebrew tools. I use Logos a lot, which is helpful. But I'm just using the same tools I used before in electronic format. It's just more efficient. But when you get into the ancient Hebrew, and the reason I learned this idea about Sarat and it being this disease was I went into the Hebrew, and that's what it sounds like. That's what it actually does. It's a disease that enters into your foot, somehow takes control of it. When you look in the original Hebrew, you get these ideas by looking at not only the roots but also the related words, the nouns that are based on the words, and so forth. Same thing with the sapphire referred to as, I believe, is hidden beneath the Sphinx. The idea of a sapphire, a book being writing inside of a sapphire stone, literally. You look at the roots and the related words. The root of the word is sefer, which means book. It basically means to scratch or scrape or to inscribe. The related words are to encipher, which means to code something. And there's the related words, which also means spin in a circle, and a couple of other things which are particularly interesting. So that together, when you have a sapphire disk, which contains coded information and spins in a circle, that could only be what we would call a sapphire hard drive. So that's why I feel that strongly that these two tablets of the law were actually sapphire hard drives, is because that's where the linguistics leads. The core concept of a book is a spinning round sapphire with writing inside of it. So when you get into the Hebrew, this is how I get a lot of my breakthroughs. You learn a lot more than you do simply by looking at the English text.
I can bet that looking at the original meaning brings brilliant revelation to a lot of this information. Wanted to ask you this, and as far as the knowledge of Cain being a hybrid and also being a son of the serpent, do you get criticized, and do people badger you about this? I'm just wondering, because I know I get so much angst over the publication of my fourth book, Lucifer, Father of Cain. And if so, how is it that you try to tell people about this information without them getting just mean? Because it seems there's so much animosity tied to it, which really it has no bearing on salvation. Whether you believe one way or the other, and it shouldn't cause division in such a way that Christians treat each other badly. I can understand the sons of Cain wanted to keep this covered up and how they would act this way, but why there's so much animosity to this knowledge, I just don't understand. Any opinions on that?
Right now, the sons of Cain and the sons of Seth are kind of intermixed, and by causing a division by marriage and by blood, and by causing a division, saying there is a difference, you're revealing to people that they are maybe internally conflicted, genetically, spiritually, and so forth, and you're kind of hitting at the core of their being, and they're causing distress to them at a very fundamental level. So as a result, you can expect them to fight back and be angry, thinking, well, what if I'm part of this? What if I'm actually a bad person or partly bad? I don't want that, so I'm going to push against that idea. Part of what Jesus said was, if you don't, and for your own sake, if you are being persecuted, that means you're probably on the right track. If you're getting along with the world and everyone loves you, then, if you just go with the flow, you're of the world. So if you're receiving persecution, that means you're probably on the right track, and the more vicious it is, the more likely it is you're going in the right direction, depending on what it is. If you're just way off or you're doing something illegal, that's something else. But if you're within reasonable theological bounds and you believe in the salvation by faith in Christ alone and so forth, that should be the basic parameter from which you should be operating. And if so, most likely the Holy Spirit is guiding you and leading you to correct interpretation. And in my Giants articles, I don't talk about the descendants of Cain so much. It's only kind of a prelude to the rest of it. And the articles I wrote online are, even though they're potentially controversial, they're still taken right out of academic texts, and the interpretation I use is a conservative one. I do regular research and don't say anything that's particularly controversial. I guess the Lucifer son of Cain part, or the Cain son of Lucifer, i.e. Lucifer literally had sexual relationships with Eve, that could cause some people some distress because it just seems strange. But it is clear that Genesis 3:15, that the descendants of Cain are the seed of the serpent. What else could that mean? There's
right, I fully agree.
So my theory is that Cain didn't actually have physical relations. What he did was, and I talk about this in my new book, In the Giants, which I'll probably get some flack for, but that's me, is that Lucifer, like the pattern of the UFO aliens in these end times and recent times will remove. He probably abducted Eve, removed one or more of her eggs, modified that egg, reimplanted it, and then put her back in the garden. And then the offspring of Adam and Eve and Satan was kind of this situation where Cain had two daddies, Adam and Satan, because he put some modified DNA in her egg, so that Cain would turn out human but modified in a way that is more suited for Satan to possess. Because Cain possessed Satan, doesn't say specifically, but I suspect that was his intention, and probably caused him to kill Abel, because otherwise I can't imagine Cain would commit such a horrible act unless he were powerfully influenced by a powerful evil being.
Right.
And that has been the way of the descendants of Cain since, using murder and subterfuge to undermine the people of God. We're beginning to see it again.
Right. Yeah. I agree with you, because if Cain was solely of Adam, and Adam was innocent in his nature and knew no evil, especially not murder, how does that just come about? So absolutely, there was some sinister evil influence there, and Satan has been utilizing this lineage and this, the sons of Cain. A lot of people don't realize that, this war that we're speaking about, the enmity between the seed lines, the seed of the woman and the seed of the serpent, that it's ongoing and that it will continue until Christ returns to separate the harvest, the wheat and the tares. And that even like with Barack Obama, Dick Cheney, Sarah Palin, Mitt Romney, George Bush, what people don't realize is that all of these individuals are blood tied to the same lineage, and that they're connected to Queen Elizabeth and that whole royal lineage that, has forever claimed the divine right to rule, that these particular beings know that they are from this particular intermarriage of the sons of God with the daughters of man. And so that's why they consider themselves the elites, and that they have the right to rule over the world, and people don't realize that. Can you speak on that?
Yeah, well, the giants. The people ask where the giants go, and they didn't go away. They just, once their energy and the fire in them, given them by their father Satan, had burned out, and they'd done conquering all the various peoples across the earth. Their original purpose was to conquer and control all the peoples of the earth by defeating them in war, and then forming royal classes or royal dynasties on top of the various peoples. And so we have, and through them, the fallen angels would rule the earth. It's kind of like the Ring of Sauron, where he gave out these rings to various peoples, but he kept the master ring, which he would then use to rule them. It's kind of like that. The giants were the proxies through which Satan would rule the various peoples by spreading them out across the earth, giving the ability to superior aggression, superior warlike abilities, superior weapons, technology. These people end up conquering the various peoples and forming royal classes over them, some of which continue on to this day. The Queen, the English monarchy, which is originally German, actually, and is still ruling and still prominent. But there are royal classes and descendants of giants probably over every race on the earth, because that was the original intention. In my new book on the giants, I talk about my theory is that the 200 that fell from heaven, as described in the book of Enoch, but the original plan was to leave heaven and take charge of the earth by creating giants, and doing that very thing, having the giants form ruling classes over the various peoples. And then the principalities, also known as the archons in the Greek, would rule through them by possessing each king of the line, and thereby be ruling not only over their peoples but also people of God by whoever, because they controlled the entire earth. I think it's in Deuteronomy 33 that the earth, it says the earth is divided up over the rule under the sons of God, which literally means that the fallen angels divided up the earth amongst themselves in early times and rule over it to this day. And I believe that means there are not 200. I think it's at least 72 different regions over which the fallen angels rule.
Right.
And possibly as many 200, including principalities and lesser kingdoms and so forth. And what we're seeing in the end times is we're seeing a resurgence of this sort of divine right monarchy, through which the archons are reasserting their spiritual power and reattempting to take control over the earth and recreate a feudal system where they are absolute rulers over a mass of slaves. And part of the rise of immorality and the increase of technology is their attempts to weaken people's will to resist by giving them free sexuality and all kinds of good food, entertainment in order to weaken their resistance, and then use the technology that they've given us for free, quote-unquote, to enslave us, i.e. the Internet, which even now is taking all of our names, all of our numbers, all of our opinions, and they're forming profiles of us that are very detailed through Google and through Facebook and so forth. And they're getting profiles of every single person on Earth as a prelude to total takeover and total control and the establishment of the mark of the beast, which the fallen angels use to then finalize their rule over the Earth, consolidate it, all the power and all the militaries. So as part of one of our earlier points, in order to fight against the second coming, because this is ultimately what they're all about. They are fighting a war against heaven, and they're using us to help fight it. Ultimately, Satan's goal is to raise an army on Earth and take it up to attack heaven and to retake the throne of heaven away from Jesus. That's his ultimate goal. But Jesus will take the fight to him and will defeat Satan on his own ground and take over, and he will rule the earth. So he'll turn the tables on it. And Satan's plans will not only be foiled, and he'll not only not gain the throne, he'll actually lose the earthly throne he's tried so desperately to keep.
Right. I want to ask you about the Nakash and go into that, but before we do so, can you give us more information on, because I want to stay focused on the giants right now, can you give us more details about the direction of your book, the different things that you will be bringing out, and also if you'll touch upon the Homo artificialis and kind of talk about that a little bit as well.
Well, in my original articles, I laid out the more of a scientific way to kind of define the different races of giants and classes of giants. The original type of giant, the first one, Cain, and those like him, the kind of basic proto-giants, I classed as Homo artificialis, which literally means artificially manufactured or artificially altered mankind, because the giants were not made out of whole cloth. My theory is, and this is actually part of my talk about in my book in the Giants, is that the early prototypical forms of mankind that we see in the fossil record were actually Satan's failed attempts to create his own form of mankind in order to preempt what he saw in the divine record as what would eventually be created by the Son of God. And this is fighting against Jesus, reincarnate Jesus, and his rule over the earth. And Jesus created mankind and all the animals and plants in their orders and kinds. He followed after his father's rule the way his father wanted to do it, according to a predefined plan that they had planned before the universe had even created. But Satan wanted to preempt that rule and preempt their plans. So he tried to create his own forms of humanity, and this is what we see in the fossil record. The Homo neanderthalis, the Homo erectus, the other primitive forms. And this Homo sapiens was created not only to fulfill the earth, but also to get rid of and fight off and destroy these previous versions of mankind that had been created by Satan. But so Satan, instead of realizing that he was going to lose using that strategy because his forms of mankind were superior to Homo sapiens, instead embarked on a strategy to, instead of creating his own form of mankind, to modify the perfect form that God created and make it, quote-unquote, even better. And so this is where the giants came from. They were enhanced Homo sapiens, artificially modified. They were made taller, stronger, more intelligent, faster, better-looking, charismatic, and so forth, so they could compete more effectively in the rat race against standard Homo sapiens. And that's how they eventually outbred, and outthought Homo sapiens, and why, near the end of the world before the flood, only Noah and his 3 sons and their wives ostensibly we actually don't know. And Noah's wife were the only ones left to save from the world, because everyone else genetically modified was in some way the descendant of a giant and was therefore something that could not be saved. It was said in the Bible that Noah was perfect in all his generations, which literally means he was genetically perfect, a descendant of Adam through Seth. Basically, with the giants, you have a situation where they are not an original creation. They're simply a modification of God's original idea. And the fallen angels also modified the plants. They also modified the animals, like we're seeing now with GMO crops and so forth. This, by the way, is probably why we see in the book of Revelation 1/3 of the trees are burnt up, 1/3 of this and that. It's because they're specifically targeting the works of the fallen angels, the 1/3 who fell from heaven, and the artificially generated stuff that they created, the GMO crops, stuff like that. They are targeting the GMO crops and destroying them first, because those things, if they're left to keep growing, will eventually pollute the earth and outcompete and eventually make the earth uninhabitable, because these GMO crops are not natural, and they actually are kind of poisonous. So my theory is that they say 1/3 of the trees and 1/3 of whatever, because they are targeting the works of the fallen angels specifically, and it's a prelude to total takeover. And remember, the point of this is Jesus is returning to take control of the world. He wants to start to clean up as soon as possible, so he starts to clean up all the works of the fallen angels, and he starts basically with their modified plants and with their modified animals. Probably a lot of the livestock is wiped out by these basically asteroids falling down from heaven and just obliterating everything that God doesn't want to keep after moving on to the new millennium. And that includes a lot of people too, many of which have also been genetically modified by the fallen angels by the kind of UFO stuff we've been hearing about. So, Book of Revelation, basically that's the destruction of the works of the fallen angels. Just as we see the flood destroying the works of the fallen angels, which had covered the entire earth, and only they had to find a sampling of original genetic materials, such as the two of every kind, plus 6 of every kind of the clean animals. Plus, they probably brought a lot of plants on board, but it wasn't really clear, but they probably brought some along. I'm not really sure, but I imagine they probably did, because I suspect that the fallen angels also genetically modified the crops to the point where all the crops were not originally part of God's creation. They'd been modified sufficiently so they were no longer useful. And so all of it, everything had to be destroyed and buried. And we see something similar happening in times in a more limited way.
Yeah, it says in the Dead Sea Scrolls, the Book of Enoch that was found there, it gives the word miscegenation. I think I said that right. miscegeneaton, when speaking about the corruption that the fallen angels, how they had so corrupted not only the animal and humanity, but also the plant kingdom as well. And Wikipedia says this miscegenation is Latin miscere, to mix, and genus, kind, is the mixing of different racial groups through marriage, cohabitation, sexual relations, and procreation. And so, I think it's very interesting what you said as far as how the Lord would get rid of all the genetically modified plants and animals and things, because what people don't realize is that these crops, they are in process right now of corrupting the genetic makeup and the DNA of those that are eating. Some of these crops are eating animals that are eating these genetically modified crops. And there was a study that was released not too long ago that spoke about how in 5 weeks' time of rats being fed this genetically modified corn, how they had grown tumors even larger than the size of their own heads. It's just terrible. It's terrible. And so, I agree with you that these crops, their effects on the planet are going to be, we can't even calculate them. We don't even know how it is that all this will play out, but definitely it's corrupting all of us and the natural environment, the creatures, all the crops, and everything is just as in the days of Noah.
Right. It's going to be the same thing. people say, well, I make the argument, well, if it's exactly as it was in the days of Noah, as it is today, they probably had nuclear weapons back then too, because it said that the wars of the giants corrupted the entire Earth, and you can't do that without some sort of weapon of mass destruction, and the only one that could do that is a nuclear weapon. And since nuclear weapons really aren't that hard to figure out, I mean, we've done it with relatively primitive technology. Those people who lived in that golden age, who had access to the teachings of the fallen angels, surely could have figured it out. So people say, well, that's not possible. Well, why is this other stuff possible and not this? Genetic manipulation is just as complicated, if not more so, than nuclear development, because we still haven't mastered genetics. We mastered nuclear power 60-plus years ago now. So obviously, if they can genetically modify humans, they can create nuclear weapons. Certainly be motivated to do so if they're at war with other races. So it's we have in the old ancient world, and I talk about this also in my book on the giants. I don't talk just about the giants, but I also start getting into the technology and theorizing about what kind of technology they had available to them, and how it was this sapphire technology I was referring to, and things of that nature, computers, not necessarily nuclear weapons, but advanced weaponry such as the use of steel swords instead of iron or bronze. Goliath was said to have a new sword that he used to fight against David. New literally means a technologically sophisticated sword. And the word, it's like, I think it's based on the word chokmah or something like that, which means wise or skilled. It could be that the Philistines had what we call advanced technology that they used to help them conquer their enemies. And this is typical of the descendants of Cain and the giants in general, as not only did their fallen angel fathers make them taller and stronger, they also gave them technology. It says that in the Book of Enoch that Azazel taught the man the ability to mine and refine minerals and create a sophisticated weapon and also camouflage. And it was said that the women were taught the use of plants and herbs for medicinal and other uses. Basically, they were taught what we would call the fine arts and sciences. And even though they didn't get into depth and say they were taught metallurgy and were taught geology or whatever, that's basically what they were taught. And if they knew geology, metallurgy, and things like that, then they were scientists. And as scientists, they understood and had the ability to find out even more stuff. And so eventually they would figure out the secrets of the atom. They would figure out advanced weaponry. I suspect Azazel's use of cosmetics in terms of not only for applying to make women more attractive. The base concept of cosmetic is camouflage. And so what we have with Azazel's weaponry, he also probably was able to create what we would call a stealth fighter, which is a fighter that is camouflaged and difficult to see. And so when you see the advent of stealth fighter technology, then you know that Azazel is back in town, because this is exactly the kind of thing he will be doing. My theory is a lot of this technology has been given to us by the fallen angels over the past century. They've been working very hard to get this information to us in order to build us up and build up our economy and our technological ability. They created the false dichotomy of East-West conflict between Russia and America and the Cold War, which led to the necessity of the buildup of the militaries of both sides, the military technology, so that after 100 years, we'd be advanced enough to provide weapons that could give God a run for his money when he tries to return. Probably more along the line of creating polluted environments, because I suspect the loyal angels cannot operate effectively in a polluted, impure, unclean environment, and that's why we have in the Bible such an emphasis on cleanliness. Is because the angels cannot work effectively in an unclean and sinful environment. This is why we have, and when Israel fell into idolatry and stopped following the law, then God withdrew from them and withdrew his blessings from them. It's because the angels, who were servants and messengers, were no longer able to effectively function in that environment because they become unclean and sinful. And as a result, they had to withdraw. And in that vacuum, fallen angels and demons came in and took place, and that led to the downfall of Israel. And really, anyone who fails to follow after God, they eventually become accursed. And God abandons them, and they fail.
I want to ask you about the reintroduction of the giants after the flood, and ask you specifically about about Ham and Canaan and why it was that Noah cursed Canaan. And from my research and my look into what was revealed, that what occurred and what is being veiled when it says that Ham looked upon the nakedness of his father was, and I don't know if you agree with this or not, but according to Leviticus 18:18 and the Targums, Ham actually had an incestuous affair with his mother, Noah's wife, and that he impregnated her with Canaan, who was the fourth-born son of Ham, and not the son of Noah, and that's why it was that Noah cursed Canaan to be the servants to the sons of Shem, and that it was Ham and the line of the Canaanites that the fallen angels went to after the flood to reintroduce their knowledge and to bring about the worship of the fallen angels again, and the idolatry and the knowledge of the watchers, and that all that was passed to the Canaanites who were in the land of Israel or Canaan, and that this is also where the Philistines and the giants of Philistine, where they were located and focused. Is this something that you had also come to discernment on, or have you looked into this at all, Doug?
Not that particular angle. The curse of Canaan is, of course, a prominent theme because it's one of the first things that happened in the world after the flood. The curse of Canaan is, of course, kind of a polemic against the Canaanites and a reason for the Israelites to have reason to attack them. I mean, such a flagrant violation of that type, whatever it was, would result in the offspring of a bastard race, literally, that had to be destroyed. It was at the very least highly undesirable. You certainly should intermarry with them. So I think that was part of the propaganda leading towards the necessity of the annihilation of this entire race because they had sinister origins. They were evil from the beginning, and their race is evil, and they're totally corrupt and bankrupt and a danger to races around them. As a result, they had to be destroyed because if they did not, we'd eventually have a situation as it was before the flood, where the entire earth was corrupted by their wickedness, and there would be a necessity for another flood, which was not desirable and not part of God's plan. So instead, He sent the Israelites and wiped them out and get rid of them, so that they could avoid the necessity for a second flood.
Right. Hey, Doug, there's a gentleman in the chat room that would like to ask you a question, and he called in. So would you like to take this question from him?
Sure.
All right. Area code 250, you had a question for Doug?
Yes, as a matter of fact, one of the things that I've been looking into recently is some very interesting advances in genetic engineering. Now, I noticed that you mentioned that the giants were Homo artificialis, and I was wondering whether or not this some of the latest developments in genetic engineering might cause concern for a recreation of the race of giants and possibly reintroduction of them into our population today.
Good
yeah,
question.
well, the trend is towards designer babies when creating physically superior, mentally superior children, which honestly I'm not sure I wouldn't want to do myself, because we all want to have our children to have advantages, and they want us to get rid of particular genes that lead to disease and so forth, which I think is a good thing. But the tendency would be in such a scenario is for the wealthy to be able to genetically alter their babies to make them superior to others, and so we'll end up with a sort of a superior race over that is wealthy and genetically near perfect over a race of lesser beings who are not wealthy enough to be able to afford this kind of selective breeding, or through religious or personal reasons refuse to do it. So one of the problems with doing this is it does have hygienic effect for people. Less disease means less cost to the state and so forth. But there are problems where you might be looking for an evil gene or a criminal gene, which if someone is born with that and it's not removable, the state could say, well, this person is going to turn out evil. We're going to have to abort them postpartum, even after the abort. And frankly, the liberals are even trying to institute the idea that it's okay to abort babies after they're born now. I mean, it's not enough to abort them in the womb or while they're being born, which is one of the things Obama did. One of his big things when he was in Illinois was the abortion. You can abort children up to the point of birth, where their head is literally coming out of the birth canal. But that's a secondary thing. But the point is that the state has a tendency to institute control through technology, and the more technology the state has access to, the more and more we are going towards the sort of master race national socialism we saw in Nazi Germany. It would be a kindler, gentler version with a smiling face on it, but it's still going to be basically the same thing. We're going to end up with people at the top of society who are genetically perfect or near perfect, tall, blonde, beautiful, and most of the people underneath them short, unattractive, very much kind of a Brave New World kind of situation where in Aldous Huxley's Brave New World, the state literally would create classes of people by when they're in the womb, introducing toxins, so they would become limited as to their ability later in life to achieve various levels of achievement. So you could literally create classes of workers, classes of mid-level people, upper-class people, and then ruler classes. That's kind of what the socialists are going towards, because they're all about control and efficiency to the point of dehumanizing people. So even though there's a good side to the modification of the human genome towards its improvement, the potential for evil there is also very high.
I guess my question is that do you think that this information or this technology may have been introduced by a fallen angel specifically to try to pervert the human race, to reintroduce a race of giants and basically provide a way to fight God?
Yeah, I'm not sure if the fallen angels will be able to create giants per se, because this what they do through the medical community is just modify people, improve them, select blonde hair instead of dark hair, give it genetic anomalies and so forth. Fallen angels appear to operate on their own system. They are indeed the same as the UFO aliens, where they literally breed their own people, bring them into the laboratories, create them, modify the eggs of the humans, reimplant them, and have their own process. I'm not sure if the medical community is able to do that. I mean, it would require a close coordination between fallen angels and humans, which I don't think is socially acceptable yet. But I do know where you're going. It might be part of the end times deception, where this high technology is actually a form of recreating the race of giants towards the creation of an army to fight against God. But you can modify people's thought patterns, and we're seeing this, where Christianity is becoming vilified and almost illegal in some areas. In fact, some things in the Bible, for example, in Canada, you can't talk against homosexuality; you could be arrested. So the state could do a very good job without modifying human genes and making Christianity vilified and sort of unifying the world against the second coming. But your point is well taken.
Okay.
Brother, did you have anything else that you wanted to ask us?
Nope, that was it. I was just curious.
All right. Well, we appreciate
could answer your question.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's
all
a
right.
good one.
Wanted to ask you this, Doug, just since he had brought this up. As far as this genetic modification and all the super soldier programs and all that is coming up, and how they, some people say that even Obama might be a clone of Akhenaten, who knows. But would you say that some of this genetic experimentation and some of this DNA splicing and everything might be to create more of a fit extension for them to be able to come into this realm and this world and to possess body easier to, take over the embodiments of, these particular flesh incarnations? Would that be also part of the agenda.
Yeah, they could be using genetic manipulation to switch on certain things, switch on certain enabler genes and switch off certain inhibitor genes in order for the fallen angels to more easily take over the body. That might be something that the medical community could do, in which case, wherever they got that information, whether from profane origin or through research or occult societies working sacredly with the medical community to try to institute their ideas in a kind of a secret way. That could be possible. They could modify humans so they would become more attuned to becoming possessed by fallen angels, which is basically what the giants were. Canon,
right.
A designer human, designed specifically to be sort of a fit extension for
right.
fallen angels to put on as sort of a human suit.
Yes. I just want to announce to the listening audience that we will take calls. If you'd like to call in and ask Doug a question, we've got about 36 minutes remaining. The call-in number is 646-929-0937. I just ask that you please be patient and that in a regular conversational break, we will pick up your calls and allow you to ask Doug a question. Doug, I want to ask you now about the Nakash, the feathered serpent, and how it is that is translated in the Hebrew. And the reason I bring this up and the reason I wanted to ask you this is because in the Emerald Tablets of Thoth, there is a very interesting passage, or actually several passages, and this is part of Tablet 6. It speaks about how these particular beings are able to come in and to assume the form. And so I just want to read this real quick passage, and then I'm going to get you to comment on this, Doug. But it says this: in ages past were they conquered by the masters and driven below to the place whence they came. But some there were who remained hidden in the places and plains, unknown to man. Lived they in Atlantis as shadows, but at times they appeared among men. When the blood was offered, forth came they to dwell among men. In the form of man moved they amongst us, but only to sight were they are as men. Serpent-headed, when the glamour was lifted, but appearing to man as men among men, crept they into the councils, taking forms that were like unto men, and slaying by their art the chiefs of the kingdoms, taking their form and ruling over man. Only by magic could they be discovered. Only by sound could their faces be seen. Sought they from the kingdom of shadows to destroy man and to rule in his place. Doug?
That's interesting. So they actually were able to physically walk as serpent beings on the earth and cover their faces and visage with a sort of an illusion? Is that what they're saying?
Well, actually what they're saying is that the Nakash, the Genesis chapter 3, the serpent of Genesis chapter 3, that these beings are the feathered serpents, and they are also shapeshifters. They're interdimensional, and they're able to assume as it says, that Satan can assume the form of an angel of light. So let me read one more little bit, just because if you've never heard of this, you definitely might want to read into this stuff. Just to continue. But now ye, the masters, were mighty in magic, able to lift the veil from the face of the serpent, able to send him back in his place. Came they to man and taught him the secret, the word that only a man can pronounce. Swift then they lifted the veil from the serpent and cast him forth from place among men. Yet beware, the serpent still liveth in a place that is open at times to the world. Unseen they walk among thee in places where the rites have been said. Again, as time passes onward, shall they take the semblance of men. Go ahead, Doug.
Yeah, it's interesting. I thought Nahash was actually either sort of a fallen angel type alien person, or even in my book on giants, I'm going to argue is actually sort of a computer interface, which was actually, because Nahash, the root word of it is shining. It's nechoshet, literally means like bronze. So you have the idea of a shining bronze, and the base concept of the word Nahash is actually to make a hissing noise. And so when you have a bronze hissing thing that it's shining, I've always thought that maybe that might be a reference to electricity. Possibly, that's an interesting idea. Was that from Emerald Tablet? Was that from the Emerald Tablets of Thoth, or?
Yeah, the Emerald Tablets of Thoth, and that is tablet number 6. And there's several references to these particular Nakash. Because when I speak about the Nakash, and I also trace this down in my new book, Sons of God, Who We Are and Why We're Here. Chapter 14 is all about the flying fiery serpents. But when I looked at the Nakash and studied it and studied all the different cultural aspects of it, I came to find that the Nakash, the shining one, was an enchanter, and that basically it was a feathered serpent, much like Quetzalcoatl, Kukulkan. The phoenix even is an embodiment of the Nakash, and that all of these feathered serpents, and everywhere worldwide you have this relationship where these feathered serpents brought wisdom and knowledge to the different peoples of the world, specifically Mayans, Aztecs, whatever, but that when they instituted their idolatry and their wisdom over the masses and established their priesthoods and everything, they began then to demand blood sacrifice and the cannibalism and the drinking of blood, all the same things that the serpent and the elites are into. And so, yeah, I found that it's all the same embodiment. And even Oanese, Dagon, and that they are also embodiments of this Nakash, the feathered serpent.
Yeah, I haven't studied Nahash much. I know Mike Heiser's done some research on that. That's one of his big things. It's basically the idea is it's like this shining thing.
Right.
But I'd never heard of that, so I couldn't really comment on the Emerald Tablets angle, but it is definitely interesting that they were actually literally people who serpent beings who could create the mirage of a human-looking face in order to fool people into letting them into their confidence. That was in Tablet 8.
Tablet 6.
Tablet 6.
Yeah. And if I sent you my book, The Sons of God. Look at chapter 14 whenever you get a chance, because I include passages from Emerald Tablet 1, 2, 4, 6, 8, several of them where all these reptilian, serpent, shape-shifting references are. So I highlight all of that for people. And I also bring out information from other texts as well, which let me go ahead and just get you to comment here, Doug, and then I'll look up this one other particular passage that I want to share with you.
Commenting on the Nahash and Emerald Tablets of Thoth? So I don't know much about that. I can comment on the idea of the Nahash, but in my view of it. But in my book, I could talk about my view of the Nahash in my book. Is that it's part of it's actually a form of high technology, basically a supercomputer, which was basically an interface between the spirit realm and the physical realm, kind of a combination of a television set and a computer, all in one kind of device, which was actually, in the beginning, my theory is that there was a battle in heaven, and according to some occult concepts, the battle between Michael and Satan, there was a jewel in Satan's crown that when Michael attacked Satan, he knocked the jewel from his crown and thereby defeating him because that jewel was the source of his knowledge and his power. And in the book, I make that sort of the MacGuffin, the primary object in the story, which all the rest of the story revolves around, is finding and restoring this jewel to Satan's crown, which he finally does in the end times when his descendant, the Antichrist, finds it, determines its secret, and uses it to conquer the world. In my opinion, is this great stone, this sapphire stone, shows up in major events in history, such as the Garden of Eden, where it was the tree of knowledge, or the Nahash. It was the mark of Cain, which was actually a crown, not like a mark, but the basic concept of mark is actually sort of a military standard, which got to be on top of a pole or worn as a headdress, just like the ancient Egyptians used to wear, the ancient Egyptian deities. In fact, I believe this is the very same Eye of Re which shows up in Egyptian mythology, which was said to have knowledge in it and also protect its wearer with the rays of fire, and it was also capable of healing people. It's possible that Abraham also had, and also Noah also had hold of this great sapphire stone, which they refer to as the Sohar, which is literally means shining stone, which Abraham used to heal people, and Noah used to light the interior of the ark. And this again shows up as a burning bush. This not actually the burning bush is actually a mistranslation. It's actually the same object showing up once again in a major point of ancient, particularly Israelite history. And so the Nahash is not actually a person view. It is actually a supercomputer, sort of an interface between spirit realm and physical realm, which was once used by Satan to rule over the earth, and will once again in end times be used by his descendant, the Antichrist, to once again conquer over and rule the earth.
Well, I find that fascinating. As a matter of fact, I find all of your work fascinating, Doug. I will make mention of this as far as your book, the second book, Planet X, Sign of the Son of Man and the End of the Age. Doug and I did a couple shows, and if you go to the archives, you can find the shows that we did together on this particular topic. But Doug is one of the only people that truly knows how Genesis and what it is revealing. And we speak about how it was that Genesis, in being recreated, is describing the coalescing of the early solar system and how it was that all that unfolded, and even with the Enuma Elish, that is all part of the description of the formation of our early solar system, the destruction of Tiamat, how the Earth came to be where it was at, and how it came to then begin the harboring of the multiplicity of life, and how the whole chapter of life then began unfolding upon this planet. So I would definitely recommend that people read that book. It's an incredible piece of work, very, very informative. I did find this particular passage, and so I'm going to share this with you, Doug. This is also about the Nakash, but what is interesting about this particular passage is that it speaks about, this Michael and also Satan, and how they are the heads of these two opposing forces. Mm-hmm. And so this is from the Testament of Amran, which is a pseudepigraphal book, and it's fragmented. So I'm gonna read it fragmented. I'll say ... where the periods are, okay. Just so it reads easier. But it says this, and this is Manuscript B, Fragment 1, verse 9. I saw watchers. In my vision, the dream vision, two men were fighting over me, saying, and holding a great contest over me. I asked them, who are you that you are thus empowered over me? They answered me, we have been empowered and rule over all mankind. They said to me, which of us do you choose to rule you? I raised my eyes and looked. Verse 13. One of them was terrifying in his appearance, like a serpent, his cloak many-colored, yet very dark. And I looked again, and ... in his appearance, his visage like a viper, and wearing ... exceedingly, and all his eyes ... Fragment 2. This is the part about Michael. It's not that much. It just says, empowered over you, I replied to him, this watcher, who is he to be empowered over me, this watcher? And it says, and his three names are Belial, and prince of darkness and king of evil. I said, my Lord, what dominion, ... And his every way is darkened, his every work darkened, in darkness he ... You saw, and he is empowered over all darkness, while I am empowered over all light. From the highest regions to the lowest, I rule over all light, and over all that is of God, I rule over every man. And so this particular passage also seems to give reference to these Nakash as being kind of like the shining one, the serpent, the feathered serpent of Genesis chapter 3, the one that seduced Eve and impregnated her with Cain, the first hybrid. And so it's just an interesting. Would you care to comment on this?
Very interesting. I haven't seen this before. What library was this taken from? Was this Dead Sea Scrolls or Nag Hammadi?
I believe it's the Dead Sea Scrolls, the Testament of Amram.
Oh, interesting.
A-M-R-A-M. And I'll look up a little bit more on this to see if I can get more details. But, Doug, can you tell the listening audience where to go to find your books and where to go to, check out your websites, your work, how to contact you?
Yes. The main website is Mysterious World, www.mysteriousworld.com. You can there's a link to my book on the Sphinx, the e-book, at the bottom of each page. Or you can go to Amazon.com and just type in Riddle of the Sphinx in the Kindle section, and that'll come up at the top. The Planet X book, you can learn more about that at www.planet-x.info. That's planet-x.info. You can also find that at Amazon.com or at survivormall.com. That's survivormall.com. My old book, first book, the Mysterious World Ireland. You can learn more about that at ireland.mysteriousworld.com. If you want to contact me directly, you can send me an email to publisher@mysteriousworld.com.
Well, I appreciate you sharing that information with the listening audience, Doug. I did find a little bit more detail on the Testament of Amram, and it is part of the Dead Sea Scroll collection, which was, found in 1947. And Amram was the father of Moses.
Oh.
And what was that?
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, and so this seems to, be an ancient text. And, of course, we don't have any other aspects or parts of it. I would love to have it in its completeness because just from the small fragments that we have, it's very, very interesting. It speaks about the archons, that, as described in the Nag Hammadi codices.
Well, it says I think in the New Testament, possibly the book of Hebrews, that Satan and Michael contested over the body of Moses, which was the son of Amram. So, yeah, it seems like that family line was unusual in that it was contested. And the problem with the apocryphal books is you can't trust them. It doesn't mean they're wrong, but that is interesting that people were thinking along those lines that each step. No, actually it was Jude 1:9. Michael the archangel was contending with the devil, disputing over the body of Moses.
Mm-hmm.
So that there is a concept of this, that Moses may not have been genetically pure. He may have had some of the giant lineage in him from way back, or possibly some non-Israelite lineage, because that would give Satan rights over him to dispute him. It's a possibility that Moses, being kind of a special child, when he was born, he was kind of unusual. It might be he was a mixture, which could have gone either way, which is an interesting theological question, which is enhanced by not only Jude, but also that reference to Testament of Amram. And it seems that one of my theories is that some of the stuff that he was taught on top of Mount Sinai was kind of esoteric in nature, technological, which was the province of the fallen angels. So he was, in that sense, Satan was the original high priest before he was thrown down. Each of these follow-on high priests, each of the patriarchs, starting from Adam all the way through down to Moses, were kind of temporarily stepping into his shoes, and as such had to kind of learn some more, more of the dark side kind of stuff. And I suspect that Jesus was the only one who fully understood this stuff, but he rejected it because he was superior to it. So that's why you see in the New Testament they're not doing the same kind of stuff we see in the Old Testament. But I suspect that what Moses was learning on Mount Sinai was basically the secrets of the universe, which formerly Satan handled for Paul. And then this is why there was a contention, because either Moses was partly genetically impure, and or he had learned such an advanced knowledge of the dark side that this gave the devil a degree of authority over him, which is why he was able to dispute with Michael over his body.
Have you heard about Moses having horns? Because there's some depictions, some ancient depictions of Moses, and they, they have him being depicted as with horns, and what that might symbolize. Because I believe it was that you had a theory on horns. Am I correct, Doug?
That is correct, and it's a very good question. It's an excellent and very central question, actually. Recall the Nahash question of this supercomputer. There was the Tree of Knowledge and also the Mark of Cain, and probably also the Eye of Re and the Burning Bush. My theory is that it was basically a crown, which was basically the sapphire stone, a sapphire supercomputer, which on either side, as depicted in Egyptian mythology, had two tall black horns. And if you wore this on your head, and my theory is that the Mount Serebet al-Qadim, the true Mount Sinai, or nearby the true Mount Sinai, also had nearby it a Hathor temple, the goddess Hathor of Egypt. And Hathor, one of her main characteristics is that she wore the Eye of Re on her head. And my theory is that the Eye of Re and Hathor being depicted with the Eye of Re was that this was actually a depiction of a high priestess wearing this helmet, this crown with the horns and the central crystal. And from it, learning all knowledge, because I believe one of the purposes of the crown is the communications device, which could read or could write data directly to the brain, and thereby teach the wearer of the crown about the ancient mysteries directly from embedded in this crystal. And the reason that Moses had horns is because when he was on the mountain for 40 days, he was wearing this horned crown, which was teaching him all the mysteries that he needs to know to properly manage Israel, to create the Ark of the Covenant and the other furniture, and manage the temple properly. And he had had it on for so long, he forgot he was wearing it. When he came down from the mountain, they saw him with this crazy crown on with the horns and the central crystal. And they're like, what on earth are you wearing? Cover that thing up. Because it was literally, he looked like, probably like a god coming down from the mountain. And one of my other theories is that when God said of Moses, behold, I will make you like a god to Pharaoh, I suspect he was wearing this horned crown when he went to visit Pharaoh, because if he was, in the eyes of the ancient Egyptians, it would look like a god had come out of the wilderness, because only a god, or someone sponsored by God in this case, could wear that headdress and use its powers appropriately, and thereby, probably using its headdress, that's how the miracles of the Exodus were actually performed.
It could be also that the horns are kind of like antenna, or that they attune the frequency or allow you to, to tap into that like an antenna to fine-tune something in some way.
Probably they do that as well. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, Doug, we've got about 13 minutes remaining, and I want to get you to comment on where it is that you see us heading in the short term, this year, the next few years, what you see unfolding, and just kind of your hopes and dreams for humanity.
The next few years we're going to see, I'm not sure if the tribulation is going to start in our lifetime at all, or maybe the next year or next couple of years. It's not clear. But I think it's very clear that if we're not going to be going into the de-tribulation, we're going to be going to a very great time of troubles in which the governments of the world, sponsored and powered by the fallen angels, are going to try to re-enslave humanity, using primarily technology as the means of doing so. the gift of technology that the fallen angels gave us, both in the world before the flood and afterwards, was actually a form of control. Because once the technology is in place and we've adapted it into our lives and made it part of our lives, with the smartphones and computers and all that, they can more easily track and control us that way. And when they finally institute the mark of the beast, which will be probably an embedded computer chip, they'll be able to track and control us literally, essentially using a supercomputer. My theory is, in my book, The Riddle of the Sphinx, what they will find underneath the Sphinx is not only a hall of records, a great sapphire stone into which is embedded all knowledge. This sapphire stone is also an enormously powerful, perhaps the most powerful possible supercomputer, which will then be used by the Antichrist to centrally control the entire world, as it was intended since the beginning. So once you see the Sphinx, anything buried underneath the Sphinx, first the West will find an excuse to go into conquer Egypt and take control of the treasures, as described in, I believe it's Daniel 11. And once we get there, we'll get what's underneath the Sphinx, and what we'll find there is this giant sapphire, which is effectively a supercomputer, which, when properly set up, could be used to take over all the computers of the world and allow it to be centrally controlled by one man. And that, I suspect, will happen probably in the short term. And when we see that object is probably also the abomination of desolation, which, when properly used, is an object of such evil that it's considered to be an abomination, a weapon so terrible that if you don't start running for it now, it will kill you. It is that powerful. And I actually lay out how that might possibly be true in my book, on the Riddle of the Sphinx, how if this thing is what I think it is, it literally could kill someone within seconds. And in the book, I describe how.
I think this will probably be the last question that we'll be able to squeeze in here, Doug. But with the coming of the Antichrist, do you see this as a continuation of the line of Cain and the enmity between the seed of the woman and the seed of the serpent, and that this particular being will be one of these fallen angels, the Abaddon, Apollyon of Revelation, and that this will be a supernatural being, even if he indwells a fit extension and takes on human form, but in essence he will be, one of these, like Satan or the Nephilim or one of these supernatural beings, ancient alien or whatever they want to call him.
The Antichrist will be the ultimate and an ultimate purpose of the entire line of Cain was to, through selective breeding and modification over time, to achieve the being of the person that will be the Antichrist. It will be through genetic manipulation, intermarriages of various women, modification both by fallen angels and by human doctors possibly, to the point where this person will be amazingly charismatic, tall, brilliant, handsome, difficult to resist, and the gospel, the false gospel he will preach, will be irresistible to those on the earth because it'll have all the answers. He'll probably be enormously wealthy, so he can help pay off all of our debts, which I suspect the national debt now is being purposely manufactured, so we'll be enslaved to debt. And the people in charge in our government now have been tasked with the purpose of actually making sure that America becomes overwhelmed with debt to the point where we're unable to survive without external help. And so that we're being set up for the takeover by global socialists, not just left-wingers, but socialists of all stripes. And at the top of this pyramid of evil will be the Antichrist. At the appropriate time, take control of the entire system through that technology I mentioned and use it to centrally control the entire earth. It might be he'll actually sit within the temple itself, or he'll use this object to sort of televise his image, because the sapphire stone it's referring to also is a form of telecommunications over long distances. With the similar technology that Moses used on the Ark of the Covenant, the lesser form with the two tablets of the covenant, he was actually literally to speak with God face to face and see and hear him. This technology allows, I believe, real-time communications over any distance, So the abomination of desolation will probably be the installation of the sapphire stone, which the image on this stone, which would probably be like a representation of the Antichrist, or possibly his televised image, which will be used as central means of control all the computers of the earth, and thereby everyone who's hooked into the system, which by that time will basically be everybody. And through that centralized computer, you'll be able to manage the entire earth and control every single person who's part of the system.
One final thing. Do you see the RFID, the chip, as being part of that global track and trace system? And do you see that as also being an extension, like Mark of the Beast type kind of thing?
Yes, that is the local chip on the... think of everyone at that point as a node on the massive internet network, and the chip will have the individual ID number, which uniquely identifies every person. What in the internet world is called an IP address. This chip will allow each person to be tracked individually, have a unique ID. And the Morgellons I mentioned previously, the Zerat of the Old Testament, which kind of forms a networking within the human body, I believe will actually be purposely released. This is described in Revelation 9. When these scorpions are released upon the earth, I suspect their sting will be the introduction of this Zerat, Morgellons type disease into the body. So once the chip is installed, this Morgellons type disease will grow throughout the body, form a network which attaches that chip to every muscle and nerve in the body and allows the person not only to be tracked but also literally remote controlled by overriding their muscle coordination, electrical impulses to the muscles directed by the local chip, which is in turn directed by the master computer, plus pleasure and pain compliance training. Eventually, people will literally be able to control by the central computer so that it can make them do whatever it wants, and free will will be totally gone. And in the end, this will be basically Satan's way of unifying the earth as a unified force against the second coming of Christ, so that everyone will be able to take up arms and fight against it centrally without any chance of them breaking and running in fear, because they'll no longer have control of their own bodies.
Well, Doug, I want to thank you again for joining us and for all the incredible work you do and for standing with truth against mainstream churchianity and all the prosperity teachers and all those that are sheep's and wolves clothing and that are just leading the people astray, or, you know, the blind leading the blind out there, and nobody knows even where to go to find truth. And so you're a bright light in this world, brother, and we so appreciate you. And can you once again just let the listening audience know when your next book is coming out and what the title of it is?
I don't want to give out the title out yet in case someone else wants to do it, but I will. The next book should come on Giants in late spring or summer, and I'll let you know once it comes out so we can talk about it again if you want to. It'll be some of the similar about the Giants and technology and some other interesting stuff.
All right, brother. Well, we appreciate you, Doug, and God bless everybody. I'll just pray that the Lord leads you in discernment and wisdom and guide you and protect you and your family members, your loved ones, extended family, even your animals and pets, and that, again, don't believe anything that we bring forth or anybody else. You have to do your own homework. You have to go in relationship, get in the prayer closet, get on your knees, get before the Lord, and ask Him to give you discernment on all of these things. He is the final arbiter on truth. In Yahushua, Yahweh's name, I pray. God bless all. Take care, Doug.
Right.
2 minutes.
Those who founded America, some of which thought of it as a new Atlantis, are trying to recreate.
Right. In your study of the prior times and the mysteries of the world, have you come up upon a lot of information about Atlantis and Lemuria, or what they call Mu, or the continent of Pan, and how that ties into all of this as well?
I've studied Atlantis and Lemuria to some extent, mainly from the writings of such people as David Hatcher Childress and those kinds of people. But Atlantis, you can actually, the only really reliable ancient source on Atlantis is Plato's dialogues.
Right.
Timaeus and the Critias, those plays and or those dialogues, and they talk about Atlantis as kind of the ideal civilization, which was highly technologically advanced. And it was interesting that Casey also talked about what he called as the tuoi crystals, that or the Taui crystals, it's not clear how it's pronounced, that the Atlanteans had developed and used in order to generate great power sources that they could use to move airships to and fro across the face of the earth. But that the power source was then turned by the sons of Belial towards warlike ambition in order to conquer the earth, and this led to the ultimate downfall of Atlantis in their war against what some have termed Ossyria, which is the modern Mediterranean region, and also Egypt and North Africa. And this ancient war between these two powers, Atlantis sunk in a day and a night because apparently the weapons they were using were so powerful they disrupted the very earth itself and their attempt to use them as a sort of an earthquake weapon to destroy their enemies on the continent ended up sinking Atlantis and destroying ancient Atlantis with their own technology. But the idea that they used crystal again on the origin, it might have been sapphire, possibly quartz, it's not clear, indicates that this technology might be a sort of a top technology that, when one achieves it, it indicates the end of an age, when men get so powerful that the gods, or in the Christian sense, God himself, have to come down and put an end to it. Otherwise, mankind will destroy himself and pollute the earth with this.
Would you say that the attempt by the sons of Belial during the time of Atlantis and their unification of the world under a global trade and how they were trying to conquer everything, that really that would be an attempt at a new world order, and that may be even Satan's first attempt at unifying the world in global conquest?
Mm-hmm. Seems to be the same pattern, where these fallen people are attempting to unify the world under kind of a global socialist control, whether it's national socialist or global socialist, or whatever kind of socialist. It's centralized government control.
Right.
And my theory is that they're doing this because they know God is on his way back, and they need to put together a unified defense. In order to put together a unified defense, they have to unify the world economies and everything. This, of course, include disarming everyone, which is why we're seeing such a great push towards this now. And eventually their end game is to provide a unified world with a unified army, which will provide adequate power to provide a competent defense against the second coming of Christ. It'll, of course, fail utterly to the point where there's really no point in trying, but they seem to need to keep trying for some reason, even though it's kind of pathetic because they keep failing, because they really have a chance. They're just up against a massively superior force. So these sons of Belial, even though they can't possibly win, keep trying because they have nothing else to do.
I think also that it has something to do with leading as many astray as possible, because they don't want any of the sons of God to inherit those orders which they abandoned so long ago.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I do. I don't think that any of God's children can be led astray. It even says the Bible will not lose even one of them. All of them will be saved. So it's really a process on the side of God and Christ and Christianity. It's just a matter of processing his people.
Blog Talk Radio.
And in those days there were giants in the land, and the sons of the angels of God looked upon the daughters of men and found them fair, and took of them wives, and their sons became of old great men of renown. So they have been mixing with us on a genetic level since the time of Enoch and Ezekiel's will.
Here on Earth we're intrigued by the sun, moon, and stars, and imagine there's got to be planets like ours. Some conceive of a face on the surface of Mars, so in need of a meaning and purpose we fall. That indeed they believe that these might be our gods, or that maybe with time we'll do right and evolve and eventually reach what they seek and then solve all the problems of man. But they really don't know that they fall in the works of our hands, all by just filthy rags. So we travel the lands to dig up our past. Time elapses, and with it are much of the facts. Some imagine that God came in alien craft. They react in this way, they're so desperate for meaning and purpose, but satanic service, they know that they have evil motives. Am I making you nervous? I'm just scratching the surface. The signs from Ezekiel's wheel, when the skies unfold like scrolls and the breaking of seals. Heed the warning, the message is clear. Heed the warning, the time draws near. See the signs from Ezekiel's wheel, when the skies unfold like scrolls and the breaking of seals. Heed the warning, the message is clear. Heed the warning, the time draws near. In the blink of an eye, all believers will be raptured. Anyone left receives a mark or the caption. This leader will arise, claim his origins are alien, possessed by Satan on the side of the Nephilim. Profess those who left held us back from evolving. And now that they're gone, we'll solve all of Earth's problems. The worship of any one God will be halted. Evolving to gods and ourselves be exalted. They'll play on these lines, and in time they'll devise and arrive at a plan that will help hypnotize all the ones left behind, the spiritually blind. He's stolen their souls, now he's stealing their minds. It's already started, we're seeing the signs. Just study the word, prophecies all aligned. They'll chop off the heads of all those who fight at one earth, one world. Aren't you excited? The signs from Ezekiel's wheel, when the skies unfold like scrolls and the breaking of seals. Heed the warning, the message is clear. Heed the warning, the time draws near. See the signs from Ezekiel's wheel, when the skies unfold like scrolls and the breaking of seals. Heed the warning, the message is clear. Heed the warning, the time draws near. Where will you be in the year 2012? Are they casting a spell they're not ready to tell? It's time to reveal what they tried to keep veiled. Pure evil they hail and they sell it so well. He fell from the heavenly realms where he dwelled, a once beautiful angel that tried to rebel. Expelled from the light into darkness and hell, now a serpent and snake with reptilian scale. He wears a disguise with angelic wings and mimics the truth with a lie so obscene. He always repeats the same thing he told Eve, that you'll be supreme, a king or a queen, that you can evolve to an enlightened being, a god of your own that can do anything. He feeds on our souls with this fraudulent scheme in so many ways, but it's all just the same. See the signs from Ezekiel's wheel, when the skies unfold like scrolls and the breaking of seals. Heed the warning, the message is clear. Heed the warning, the time draws near. See the signs from Ezekiel's wheel, when the skies unfold like scrolls and the breaking of seals. Heed the warning, the message is clear. Heed the warning, the time draws near.
Why hide yourself with, creating UFO crafts and things like that? Why that deception if that's indeed what's going on?
The creatures figured out that there was one way that they could frighten mankind, and that is to present themselves as technologically superior beings from physical UFOs.
Why would they want to abduct human beings?
UFO abduction might not be caused by physical occupants, but from creatures living in perhaps what we would call another dimension.
Posing as occupants.
Yes, the same type of interfering, harassing, paraphysical creature in every culture worldwide.
Reaching your head with the cold and sudden fury of a divine messenger. Let me tell you about heartache and the loss of God, wandering in hopeless night. The seeker of lost paradise may seem an insidious fool to one who has never sought the other worlds. Welcome, friends, readers, listeners, and viewers from across America and around the world. I'm Zen Garcia, your host. This is FallenAngels.tv, and we're coming to you on a Friday evening broadcast. It's 5 p.m. Eastern Time, and we're streaming out of Athens, Georgia, East Coast, United States of America. I've been blessed to be joined by Doug Elwell. I'm going to read a little information so that those that don't know about him and his work. He does and has been bringing incredible information out for several years now, and I've been privileged to have done shows previously with Doug. But real quickly, by day, Doug Elwell works in the field of information technology as a freelance website developer, and by night, Doug moonlights as a travel writer focusing on mysterious and exotic travel destinations around the world. Doug's second book, Planet X, The Sign of the Son of Man and the End of the Age, reveals his hidden passion as an advanced theoretical theologian, focusing on retranslating the Bible in the light of the modern scientific advancements. Doug's third book, The Riddle of the Sphinx, delves deep into the question of what is buried in the mysterious Hall of Records underneath the Sphinx, where he discovers that there is nothing new under the sun. Tonight, Doug will reveal ancient secrets regarding the creation, nativity, and end times, and how Planet X is intimately involved in the birth history, fate of mankind, as well as the secret hidden within the mysterious Hall of Records underneath the Sphinx. Doug, it's always an honor and a pleasure to have you join us. Can you give a shout-out to the listening audience?
Shout out to you guys. Zen, thanks for having me on, and God bless you all in the United States of America in these dark and evil times are coming.
Yeah, it does seem like these are oppressive times with the end game in sight with the global financial collapse, and who knows how all that is going to play out. And we're going over the fiscal cliff and $16 trillion of debt, and they're still spending like they're drunken sailors. So no end in sight. How do you see all that playing out? Because we know that this is part of the agenda for global government in the New World Order.
Well, it's just part of their plan. In order to have a new world order, you have to get rid of the old world order. Like we had in the Star Wars movies, you basically have a situation where the old republic is allowed to get so corrupt, in fact it's encouraged to get corrupt, so that the rise of an emperor and an empire is necessary. People are, the left and the right, and basically the Spectre-like organization behind the scenes, probably the Freemasons and other people like them, have been actively undermining the United States for some time for the preparation of the rise of the Great New World Order, which will probably rise out of the ashes primarily of the United States itself.
Right.
So, not only, in my opinion, the end times beast, the seven heads, are the G7 nations, the economic powers led by the United States,
right,
which will have been undermined and the old republic swept away and replaced by the new galactic empire led by the Antichrist, and this will happen probably pretty soon the way things are going.
I want to also, since we're on this topic, get you to make mention of the gun law that was just defeated in Illinois, since you're from that particular state. But they were trying to push forth a law that would ban 50% of the firearms in that particular state, and it was shot down. But we know that the globalists and the transnationalists, that they have to come for our guns, and that is going to be a large part of the agenda for this year.
Yes.
Okay.
We've been fighting against Illinois gun laws, and which has, I think, the highest, if not one of the highest, if not the highest, gun control laws in the country. And we've been fighting tooth and nail against kind of like, I see DuPage County, where I live, as sort of a Minas Tirith, which is kind of holding the guard against the Mordor of Chicago, where they've been constantly trying to, it's mainly just Chicago, it's anywhere south of Chicago and west of DuPage, and DuPage is mainly pretty conservative. But Chicago is so huge and so densely packed with liberals that they've been able to guide the agenda for the state. And one of the primary agendas is to get rid of guns, even though Chicago is a gun-free zone. Their crime rate has skyrocketed. They have only had over 500 murders last year. And history and statistics show that wherever you have gun control laws, you have crime out of control because no one can defend himself against the crime. Criminals are essentially cowards, and they think they could be shot in the commission of a crime. They will not commit it, most likely. So places that have concealed carry and things like that, which, by the way, Illinois will have to have because of the federal mandate that the Illinois gun laws are unconstitutional. As soon as that happens and people are allowed to conceal carry or have guns, I guarantee you the crime rate will go down and things will get back to a more reasonable level.
Well, Doug, can you tell us how it was that you got involved? Because I know your book, your latest book, is focused on the giants. And so we're going to get into some of these esoteric topics. And then I would also like to ask you about your previous books and works as well, just to get the listening audience familiar with all of the ones that you have done. So would you mind just beginning with your first book, A Mysterious World, Ireland, which you co-authored, and give us a little bit about each one, the focus, the premise, and what they're about.
Mysterious World Island is the first in a series of travel guides put out by Mysterious World, kind of looking at the mysterious side of various locations, some more interesting, esoteric, ancient parts of various locations around the world. We found that Ireland had the best cross-section of probably the most mysterious locations per square mile of anywhere in the world, except for maybe Egypt. Plus, it's a very clean and safe place to go, and it's very popular. So I chose to do Ireland, and that came out in 2006. And that's basically a combination, complete history of Ireland, including mythology, religion, ancient history, modern history, and so forth. Plus, a comprehensive travelogue covering the entire island, all four provinces, top to bottom, left to right, and very comprehensive. It's a very good book. You can check that out at ireland.mysteriousworld.com. The second book, actually, there's a co-author and publisher on that one. The second book I wrote and published, I just wrote by myself, was called Planet X, The Sign of the Son of Man and the End of the Age, subtitled Planet X at the Creation, Nativity, and Second Coming, where I discuss my theory, based on Sitchin's theory, that there is another planet in our solar system which has a long, elongated orbit, similar to that of a long-period comet, which brings it into our solar system, the inner solar system, only once every 2,000 years. The last time it appeared was as the Star of Bethlehem, which presaged and heralded the first coming of Christ, and it will return again sometime soon as the sign of the Son of Man and the end of the age, as described by Jesus in Matthew 24:30. Matthew 24, if you like eschatology and end times, I recommend you learn Matthew 24 thoroughly, because Jesus basically gives a very pithy overview of the entire end time scenario in order. So there's very little confusion about what will actually happen in the order it will happen. And if you're a pre-tribulational rapturous person, which I am not, you'll probably be off-put by that, because there's no mention of a rapture at the beginning of the tribulation. He doesn't say there will be a resurrection or a lifting away of the believers until the sign of the Son of Man appears and the angels, come forth and the seventh horn is blown and so forth. So my position on that is I'm actually a seventh trumpet resurrection person.
Last trump, last day.
Yeah, last day. It's good, because that's what the Bible clearly states. You have in the Bible, right after the seventh trumpet is blown, you have a parenthetical period, and then you just have the resurrection of the saints, where the angels come down with the sickles and reap the harvest of the earth, and then you have the bowl judgments. It's all right there. I'm not sure whether there's any confusion.
Right, exactly. And then and that's the harvest, the separation, and all that. I agree.
Exactly. So that's basically what that's about. And then my latest book, the book I have published exclusively on Amazon Kindle, called The Riddle of the Sphinx, talks about this is kind of the heart of mysterious world. The Riddle of the Sphinx has always been kind of the beginning and end of the concept of mysterious world. The Sphinx has always been kind of the secondary symbol of mysterious world next to the world itself. And the riddle of what is underneath the Sphinx, I've always felt intuitively that whatever is hidden underneath the Sphinx contains all the answers about past, present, and future. This is, I don't necessarily follow Edgar Cayce, but those who do, what he did, he had a trance vision, probably a demon who gave him knowledge about how there was something important hidden underneath the Sphinx, what he called a hall of records. And in this hall of records, whether the hall contained the records or something, it's not really clear, contains all knowledge of all technology, all history, and everything in one comprehensive package. My theory is that this is basically a supercomputer using somehow leveraging a gigantic, say, a good-sized sapphire stone, actually about 12 inches across is my theory, into which all knowledge is encoded. And in the book I go into not only the history and mythology of the Sphinx, but also the hidden secret, I believe, is hidden underneath there, which is basically ancient technology from before the flood, which contains all knowledge.
Have you read the Emerald Tablets of Thoth?
No, but it's basically the same concept, in that all knowledge is written in on the Emerald Tablets. I've considered that as well, because the concept of an Emerald Tablet, or any kind of a jewel having data written into it, is kind of a consistent theme. In fact, the word book in Hebrew is both the root of the word is sefer. It's the root of the word book, it's the root of the word to write, and it's also the root of the word sapphire. So intrinsic to the idea of a written book is that it is actually written inside of a sapphire within the Hebrew mindset. And so the Emerald Tablets is a similar situation where you're using similar ancient technology in order to write data into jewels in a format that is effectively permanent.
Would this be similar to the crystal skulls?
Crystal skulls, if they used a laser to write into the skull or any clear crystal, you can write data inside of crystals. That's actually the next generation of hard drive. Is actually going to be probably crystal technology, where they have, and are developing this now. It's called 3D optical technology. The CD in your hard drive actually is a primitive form of this kind of technology, except it's just one layer. With the next generation of hard drives, will be thousands of times larger, with many layers of crystal you can write to. For example, a CD is actually only one layer, a plastic disc with aluminum oxide written on it, which a laser then writes pits of various depth to do ones and zeros. A DVD is basically the same thing, except there's several more layers, which gives it more data to write to on a z-axis. Think of it basically as 5 CDs stacked on top of each other, or 6 CDs. With the next generation of optical technology, you'll have basically a complete crystal work, which could have thousands or millions of layers, depending on how thick the crystal is. So you'll have many more times data storage than you do normally. And as a result, you literally could store all knowledge on a single disk of sufficient size, unlike now where the hard drives we have are starting to get maxed out on how much we can pack on them. In order to get more storage space, we're going to have to move to a next generation optical technology, which I believe actually existed in ancient times, given the technology given to the Israelites and possibly the Egyptians, ancient Egyptians, people before the flood had known this technology as well. But in either case, God knew this technology and used it to write the 2 tablets of the law, which were effectively what we would call 3D optical hard drives.
Would you agree with Hesiod then that basically culture and civilization has been breaking down since the Golden Age, and where everybody considers that we are the most advanced and most technologically superior culture and civilization ever known upon this planet, that in truth we are at the lowest, and that our culture and society is really has degraded since the early technologies and the wisdom and knowledge that was here with the ancients?
Yes, I agree. The ancient world was probably, in the civilized eras, it was much more sophisticated than we are. They even gave, the ancients even gave ages of man, the gold and silver, I think it was bronze and iron, of succeedingly more military and technological, but also it's an increase in technological savvy, but a decrease in culture and quality of life and living. And what I believe in the most ancient world, the world before the flood, was actually very highly technological, even more so than we are now. Plus, they had the cultural superiority, so it was truly a golden age. And it's this kind of golden age that